WTVG Toledo, Bridges, with your host, Doni Miller, connecting our community with information about issues and opportunities.
Hi there, I'm so glad to have you with us today on Bridges. We are talking about an issue that certainly inspires an awful lot of passion in almost anybody who's involved in the conversation, and that issue is voter suppression. We're talking about lots of things today with our guest, absolutely the busiest man in Republican politics, John Steinbrook, who's the chair of the local Republican Party. How are you doing?
Great. How are you, Doni?
I'm doing great. Before you start to talk, let me tell the viewers just a few other things, because like, once you get going, it's a roll.
Okay.
You will remember that we had Pete Gerken here just a few weeks ago talking about this issue from the Democratic point of view. Mr. Gerken's position is that through Secretary Husted, from the state and through the Republican Party, there is a deliberate strategy to suppress the vote of African Americans and poor people in this county. John Steinbrook is here today. I will let him tell you his thoughts, but I can tell you he and Pete are not quite on the same page. Is that fair to say?
I think that's fair to say. I think, Commissioner Gerken, with all due respect, is overstepping his boundaries, because at the Board of Elections, first of all, the county commissioners have no oversight over the Board of Elections. The only thing we do is we give them our budget, Doni, and say this is what money we need, and then they will give us that money. And if they aren't going to give us that money, then we would have to go to court to get that money. So there isn't going to be a problem. We give them our budget, and they give us that money. In this case, Pete Gerken, who is also, on the runway with Barack Obama when he came to town, protesting with the people when we opened up the Romney phone bank in Maumee. He's way involved, and it's kind of scary that he's that involved with this, as he's a candidate on the ballot and he's a county commissioner. So he thinks he's the fifth board member at the board, and he's not. So,
let's do a couple of things. First, let's define for folks what voter suppression is. I think we have a definition there. It's a strategy, and it's the same one we used when Mr. Gerken was here, to influence the outcome of an election by discouraging or preventing people from exercising their right to vote. So that's Commissioner Gerken's position. So he's not talking about this, if I might speak for him.
Oh, please.
Based on his appearance on the show is
right.
How I'm choosing to speak for him. He is not saying that he is exercising any oversight as a county commissioner. He's not saying that this is necessarily in support of Barack Obama, but as a citizen, he is concerned about what appears to be a Republican strategy to keep people who could swing the election in President Obama's favor away from the polls.
Wow, so much
And that you all at the Board of Elections are the tool that's being used to make that happen in Lucas County.
Well, gosh, there's so much to say, so let's just start from the beginning.
Yeah, why not?
We come up with a RFP, which is kind of like a bid of where we would pick to have an early vote center.
Request for proposal.
Yeah, there you go. And the commissioners gave us the city of Toledo as the zip codes that we could pick, okay? And then brought that to the board. Now, we're the Lucas County Board of Elections. We're not the City of Toledo Board of Elections. So if there's any type of suppression, it sounds like the county commissioners are suppressing the suburban vote. And that's exactly what was done by the commissioners. So the only locations that were submitted to us by the commissioners for the RFPs, which we both talked about in unison, were the City of Toledo, Doni. So that doesn't help the people in the suburbs as well. So, moving fast forward, we picked a location that's actually downtown. So all of this rhetoric and all the scare tactics that were used by, Commissioner Gerken saying that we were trying to, look, if I wanted to put the early vote center, we would have voted to put it in Sylvania, Ohio, or Berkey.
Because you have that authority.
No, there's two of us, two Republicans and two Democrats.
Right.
And it's not even really an authority, it's a responsibility to make sure that all the voters of Lucas County are looked after. And so,
I think is it fair to say though, or what I would infer from what you've just said is that folks who live in the suburbs, Sylvania and all of those other suburbs that we might mention, have the same that the road is a smooth one when it comes to comparing the ability of folks in oppressed neighborhoods and folks in unoppressed neighborhoods to access the polls. Let me
Okay,
say
hold
that.
on, hold on.
Did you get that?
I got it. But
okay.
So I'm going to finish what I said, then we're going to go back to what you said.
Okay.
So number one, I wanted to pick a place between Sylvania, let's just say the outskirts, or Waterville White House and downtown Toledo, and that would be Maumee. So we proposed Maumee. They weren't happy with that. They claimed the building wasn't available. They claimed all kinds of things. They're not true. Okay, so this is a situation. We looked at the chart, the graph that they have online that has all the bookings of these locations, and yes, it's contracted out, but without even getting into specifics, that location did not materialize. But let's go back to what you're saying. In the state of Ohio, it was not uniform prior to this election in 2008, 2006. There were certain counties, Donnie, where urban counties had money that they could mail absentee ballot request forms to voters in that county. So for instance, Lucas County is an urban county. Mm-hmm. The board here voted, before I was on it, 4-0, 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats, to mail absentee ballot request forms to all the voters in Lucas County. Okay, so the voters in Lucas County had an advantage over, let's say, Butler County, which may be Republican, and they don't have the money or the finances to mail absentee to be. So in theory, those people in Lucas County were given an unfair advantage, and if you want to use the terminology that you want to use, disenfranchised or whatever, the people in Butler County, the Republicans, were disenfranchised. This was an unfair, unlevel playing field, which John Husted came in and said, that's not fair. The voters in Lucas County, it's 3-1 Democrats to Republicans.
All right, but consider this. Okay. Consider this. Remember that the focus of this conversation is oppressing the ability of the people who could swing the vote.
Okay, how is it being oppressed?
Here's the argument. Okay. The argument is that if you put a voting site in a place like Maumee, then
it's not in Maumee. It's in Toledo.
but it wasn't. It was. Originally, that was one of the scheduled locations.
Maumee is in between Sylvania.
Okay, but listen, let me finish.
Okay.
So if you put it in a place like Maumee,
you're lobbying for Pete Gherkin.
I'm not lobbying for Pete Gherkin, but I'm certainly here to challenge your perceptions, just as I challenged Pete's when Pete was here.
Well,
Pete thought I was lobbying for you.
Okay.
All right.
Well, I
must
not have
Pete
seen
thought
the whole
I was
video.
lobbying for you.
Okay.
So when, if you put the voting, the opportunity to vote, early vote, in a place like Maumee, or in a place like where let's just use Maumee, then for someone who's living in the central city, who doesn't have, at least according to the economic indicators of this area, the opportunity to drive a car out there, the bus is not very friendly in that regard. Haven't you, in effect, lessened the ability of that person in the central city to vote? That's the argument here.
Okay, ready?
Yes.
Okay, so now, not only back in the day you could vote on one day in November, and that was it, one day, 13 hours.
Right.
Now you have 35 days, over 700 hours to go to an early vote center, no matter where it would be. And you can also now vote because the Secretary of State is mailing absentee ballot request forms to every registered voter in the state of Ohio. Donnie, isn't that wonderful?
That is.
And guess what?
That's a cool thing.
It doesn't matter where you live. You could live in Sylvania, Berkey, the inner city, or Maumee. You can vote from the privacy and the convenience of your own home. And you can decide when you want to vote.
But let me tell you what the Blade said about that. Okay.
What did the Blade
and
say?
I want to. This is what the Blade said.
Okay.
The Blade said there are many people in this community who feel as though the right to vote is far too important to mail your ballot in, who really want to be at the polls to vote.
Right.
Okay. That's what the Blade said. In addition to which, and I think this is fair, and I'm not beating up on you at all. You can handle me. That's not an issue.
No, I love being here.
So this is. You got to remember, too, that the voters are coming off of a whole lot of discussion about inefficiencies at the Board of Elections.
Right.
Ballots being mailed in that aren't counted.
Right.
Ballots being lost.
Yeah.
So if you're coming off of that kind of publicity, how do we get comfortable with mailing in a vote, especially in an election as important as the presidential election?
Question. First of all, there's never been a Republican presence on the Lucas County Board of Elections that actually stood up for the Republicans. The Democrats compromised most of the Republicans that have been on the board prior. For example, when Jennifer Brunner was the Secretary of State, when the early vote center was in the inner city, it was 4-0 vote. The Republicans never objected. Why? That should be a question that's asked by any Republican that thought they had representation. Number two, absentee ballots were paid for by, they voted 4-0 to mail the Democrats 3-1 in Lucas County. 2 Republicans on that board voted to mail that to the Democrats in the county. So that should be a question you should ask yourself too. So finally, we have Republican presence on the board that says it's got to be fair. It's got to be uniform across the board so everybody's treated fairly. That's why the Early Vote Center is on Summit Street downtown. It's in downtown, Donnie.
But what took all of you, the 4 of you, so long to get to this Summit Street location, which is a fabulous location?
Yes.
Yeah, you want to tell folks where it is?
Yeah, it's on Summit Street. It's the old YMCA, Riverside Hospital, and it's downtown. It's right by the I-280 bridge, the new I-280 bridge.
It is.
I mean, it's
great parking.
It's great parking. And
right.
see, there is no voter suppression. That's what I'm trying to tell you. When you can vote through the mail, you can show up for 35 days over 700 hours. When you can do all these avenues to vote, you decide whether you want to vote election day, you do whatever you want. It's a potpourri. It's a plethora of where you'd like to vote.
Let me say this to you. You cannot argue with the fact that, or what appears to be a fact, that the journey to this particular site that you've selected has been a difficult one for Husted. That he's been challenged along the way by many other counties, in addition to Lucas, the very same way that Pete Gerken is challenging him. That he's been, that voter suppression has been alleged around the state. And there is some discussion that you all got to this point because Husted is deciding to back off now, that he knows that it's a fight that doesn't look good and that it's a fight that he can't win. And
Absolutely
I'm not asking you to speak for him.
Oh,
I'm just asking.
Speaking because you're mentioning John Husted and you're mentioning us, and it's been inferred by the Democrats and Pete Gerken that there's been some type of voter suppression. And I think, at face value, it's very, very, upsetting to me because it isn't happening. And when people put forth scare tactics like this, my grandma was 96 years old. She's passed away. When it would come on, the weatherman would say, "Oh my God, the clouds are coming in." She wouldn't go to the store. I mean, it scared her to death. And I don't think it's responsible for people like Pete Gerken to come on here and speak complete falsehoods and talk about, how these voting locations were a nefarious, evil plot. Absolutely not true.
All right, you hold that point. Yeah. You hold that point. We got to go away for just a second. We will be right back.
All right.